Good morning and welcome to Talking Point this Monday morning. It's a nice, beautiful day, except for all the traffic, but I guess that's a small price to pay when the kids are more or less going out to school in full force. We are in that transition. I guess you could say, we're almost back to being normal. So we all just need to enjoy being stuck in bumper to bumper traffic wherever we are as we try to leave our dwellings and go through our choked roadways in order to get where we have to go. But we'll figure it out eventually. We'll figure it out. I myself have to also figure it out a little bit as well because it seems as though every time I leave the house there's just a little bit more traffic. So I'm constantly afraid of what happens when I get hit with something I'm not prepared for. But be that as it may, it is a beautiful Monday, and it's so beautiful that I have some good news for everybody out there who are regulars of the show. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Keaton Shaw, this morning. Good morning, Keaton.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to everyone. I'm thrilled to be back here on Talking Point, though not in studio. It's best to be here virtually than not here at all. So I'm really excited and looking forward to continuing the discussions of which we last left off. And you're absolutely right. It is a beautiful day. It's wonderful outside, which is why I'm spending a lot more time in the open, considering the circumstances.
Well, the circumstances, because one of the things that now we are faced with is a little bit of uncertainty. Things are reopening, of course. We're not necessarily too afraid right now. We are nowhere near what's going on in China, to give you one example, as they are basically under fresh lockdowns because their vaccination rates are low and they haven't had COVID throughout the population, so natural immunity is also believed to be quite low. They're trying to have zero COVID, and we're seeing the effects now of prolonged lockdowns. It's actually affecting the world economy. It will probably have some ripple effects here. But we are moving ahead, reopening schools, workplaces. I think there are more measures that the government will be looking to rescind that the Prime Minister was answering. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But while that's going on, last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had on average 500 cases a day. Now, we did not necessarily see a jump in deaths, and to some extent, given the nature of this variant, it being infectious, it's not supposed to be surprising. But just when we thought that it was finally completely finished, COVID is not entirely finished. It's not entirely gone. And we ourselves, well, you yourself have some first-hand experience in that.
Well, certainly, first of all, I owe an explanation to all the viewers of Talking Point. It's unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID-19 just during the Easter weekend, and it was absolutely terrible. If I'm being honest with you, the first couple of days it was horrible. Fortunately, most of my symptoms have seemed to ease up, but of course, I still am in isolation due to the nature of the virus itself. But yes, we are fully open. I mean, fortunately for me, Sean, I have not had the experience of the bumper-to-bumper traffic that you would have. But with that, it's still a hefty price. I think we've all expected, I think it was no secret that once we reopened to the extent that we've reopened, COVID-19 would spread, considering our large unvaccinated population, which I will still always push. Yes, we've advocated for COVID-19 vaccines, and yes, Sean and I are fully vaccinated, and we've received our boosters, and still I contracted the virus. But I still believe that, considering my experience, if I was not vaccinated, it would have been a lot worse, and thankfully it was not. But we expected that COVID-19 numbers were going to rise. It was no secret. I mean, I think what the medical health team focusing on mostly as we've said since we reopened, is the death rate, and the death rate for the most part has really remained low, but cases are rising. And just speaking to a few doctors over the last week within the public health system, they've indicated to me that they believe that we're going to see another wave hitting Trinidad and Tobago. And I don't want to cause any alarm, but it's the reality of the situation, because as much as we have reopened, we also have to bear in mind that we are still in a pandemic. And I think for the most part, we've forgotten about that.
Yeah. Now, there was a few, maybe you could say, statistical anomalies, because I think at one point early last week, the numbers were, the infection rate was significantly low. The highest number of deaths for one day was 3. We of course, we already had a couple of days with 0 deaths. So looking forward to days where that's a consistent trend. Yesterday, the numbers went back down, only 200 infected. I say only 200, it's relative to how things were in the bad times. But I think therein lies the catch-22. This is a more infectious variant, but so far it seems to be, at least for countries, for areas where they've had COVID already and they've had vaccination, so you have immunity from various vectors. It's not so bad. People will still get sick. People might still get to the hospital, or at least, be in isolation, such as yourself, with heavy flu-like symptoms. But survival is a realistic expectation from almost everybody. And we're probably just going to now have to go into a different stage of responsibility, because it might be easy to take it for granted. Well, everybody will survive this, so I don't have to be as careful, even if I get it, even if I might spread it. But, I mean, the way how you sounded, this is not something that you just want to freely spread around.
No, my brother, it certainly isn't. And I'm being absolutely straightforward. I mean, I'm a person that I did miss about a week's programming a couple weeks ago for what initially I thought was COVID-19. And even then it was terrible. It turned out to be the common flu. And this virus in particular, when I tested positive, it starts off rather mild, actually. Just a simple headache and what we would call a runny nose. But it got worse. It progressed, and it got worse to the point where I even struggled to move. It was very, very difficult to move at one point. And breathing we've heard stories time and time again in relation to the difficulties associated with breathing and that sensation that you cannot breathe. And I faced that as well. And it is truly something that I do not wish upon anyone, nor do I want anyone at all to experience. It is not very nice at all. And bear in mind, some people would have had would have experienced a lot less symptoms, or the severity of symptoms, that I would have. And there would be those who would have experienced far worse. The mere fact is, contracting COVID-19 or contracting any virus of that sort is obviously not a pleasure. But in this instance, I do not think that we should go with the mindset that, I'm going to survive, I'm going to fight it, I'll be on for a couple of days. I don't think that should be the mindset. I think that as much as we pushed to get to the stage at where we're at in terms of operating within TNT, I think we also have to bear in mind that there is still a cost associated with contracting COVID-19. And Sean, you mentioned a statistical anomaly, and I think it's something that we need to bear in mind as well, is that ever since we've reopened and we've started accepting home tests and home testing kits, in my opinion, I think, or I believe, that the numbers reported on a daily basis in terms of cases is far less than what is actually happening in society. Because not only would you have individuals who are asymptomatic that could still spread the virus, but you'd also have individuals who would test at home, whether or not they're actually going to remain isolated or in quarantine, I guess it's up to the maturity and the responsibility level of the individual. But at the same time, you have to question whether or not they're going to report it to public health,
Right.
which I highly doubt. And therefore, the case numbers may actually be far greater than what we are seeing being reported right now from the Ministry of Health.
Well, one question that I have to ask, because again, you've experienced this. It's not going to be the exact same thing for everybody, but you said it started off mild and then got worse. How long did that take? Because a lot of us, I know for myself, like you previously, you have the common cold. You don't know if it's COVID or not. You're not sure if you to be extra careful, but then you have other responsibilities as well, and you don't want to just be a little too overly cautious and then let down other things that you have to do. So how long did it take for it to get as bad as it did?
Less than a day, Sean. Less than a day, because I woke up one morning and I felt absolutely fine. I felt completely normal. And fortunately, I didn't go anywhere. But I continued being active throughout the day within my room. And then later on, mid-afternoon into evening period, I started experiencing a strong headache. It was a throbbing headache. And then that turned worse because I started feeling rather hot, which indicated that, it's not just the weather. I'm starting to have a fever. Mm-hmm. And then that turned into, a mild congestion. So I thought, okay, this is just, again, probably you're worn down a bit, you're rather tired. So that could be the case because it happened all of a sudden. As I said, I woke up normal and I just continued my daily activities. And then this came on in the evening. And then I went to bed that night. And then when I woke up the next morning, that is when it really hit me. I mean, I really struggled to move. I was in a great amount of pain in terms of my body aching. I was coughing, congestion, that headache. And the fever was actually quite high to the extent that I was using cold cloths, damp cloths to try and just control my temperature level. So it was a matter, Sean, of even less than a day. It was a matter of hours, just overnight.
I mean, the one good thing now is that at the very least we have the capacity to test at home. So we don't have to go to an official testing site or a private facility, get the PCR tests, go in line, go out into public, have to drive if there's nobody there to drive us through that process. I mean, at the same time, you still have to either retrieve yourself or have someone get the testing kit for you. But at least, we don't have, you could stay home for the most part. It's a lot easier for someone else to get the testing kit for you than for someone to have to potentially drive and risk being exposed themselves. But this is just one more challenge, and later on we'll get into some of the other challenges. There are a couple of things that Keaton and I would discuss that he hasn't had a chance to weigh in on from last week. The biggest thing, of course, being our crime levels. We'll get into that once we come off of a break. Stay tuned. Sean Michael Small with Keaton Shaw. Finally, this is Talking Point, WESN, your content capital.
There's a taste in the air everywhere. Feel the vibe, 'cause it's something to share. Smooth, rich and creamy, you'll find it right here. Makes you smile, relax a while, it's fun and good cheer. Ooh, enjoy every scoop. Ooh, every taste will get you hooked. We have flavors that you love, a combination special. Come along, enjoy our treats. This is Uncle Pete's.
we delve into the exciting world of neurology.
The brain's an electrical organ. If the brain doesn't get enough blood with food and oxygen to it, it's not able to supply the electricity to the rest of the body. If that happens for a prolonged period enough time where the brain stops getting blood, part of the brain dies. Essentially, that's a stroke.
Hey guys, so I'm getting a little nostalgic here, sitting on the blocks at the pool. Today we're going to talk a little bit about swimming. What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
We have been apart for a long time. Now let's get together once again. Let's welcome you back. Family. North Coast Jazz 2022, May 27th to 29th. Born here, played here.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Points. So last week, the Prime Minister had a press conference where he answered some questions and he had some very, very strong statements to make with regards to our crime situation. Now, over the weekend, I believe, we had a police officer shot. We've had both cases of crime as well as different reports on police officers, and these things have more or less becoming more and more frequent over the last couple of weeks to couple of months. So my colleague, Mr. Gita Shah, he hasn't had a chance to weigh in on the Prime Minister's comments because the Prime Minister used some strong terms. So let's hear what the Prime Minister said once again. Let's hear that back, and then we could have the initial reaction from Keaton on this.
To see to that.
Statements of generalizations are not helpful in these situations because I don't know there's anybody running away from the fact that we are a violent society, and in recent years a number of persons have got their hands on firearms, handguns in particular, and in recent times, worse, some of our citizens have got their hands on heavier weapons, automatic assault weapons, and some of our people have been engaged in crime for profit. But then a lot of the crime is also done and only known to us when it's done in the household. I know that there are calls for the government to do more, but there are certain limitations to what the government can do with respect to household crimes. But the gun crimes, which are largely the main stream of crime in this country, the government is engaged. The police service, the SSA, we gather information, we act upon it, and of course we are hoping that the justice system would be one where we can get trials and convictions quickly. Unfortunately, that is not happening, and we just have to keep doing more of what we believe will work. And by the same time, we appeal to the population to support the police.
See these increases.
We do have some structure where some help is available, but having it available does not mean that people will use it. We do have openings, and if there's need for more of that, then we will provide more. But what we're finding, and the appeals coming from the relevant persons who are involved in managing that, the appeal is to persons, if you are having difficulty, seek help, because help is available. The fact that it's available on the government's initiative, on the government's payroll, is no guarantee that persons who need it will use it. And that is particularly true with respect to inter-family stresses. You would have seen in the newspapers that members of the family were saying that they never knew that certain persons had problems of that nature, which could have driven them to have behaved in a particular way. In that situation, what do? People don't change color, they don't change height because they are thinking a particular way. You have to keep saying, if you are experiencing that kind of difficulty, guiding you to that kind of destination, reach out for help. There is some help available, some significant help is available. And if that unit, that department is overwhelmed by the demand for help, then we can expand that if needs be.
So that is the Prime Minister's remarks. So Keaton, your response is, we are a violent society. I think that was one of the main sound bites that a lot of different media houses reported on. And while it might sound harsh, I do personally wonder if at the end of the day, it's not necessarily unfair to point that out in such harsh language.
It's a bit conflicting. That's the thing. It is rather conflicting. I personally don't think that it's fair to label all of society as being violent in nature. I don't necessarily think that is a fair comment to make. For the most part, the Prime Minister's speech was fair. For example, when he spoke about not being able to intervene within inter-family matters and inter-household matters. And many a times we've heard stories of that taking place, especially in relation to families not wanting to get the police involved. And then there are a few cases in which we've heard that the police were notified. Individuals reached out for help, and the police did nothing more than issue a warning. And the warning, no one took heed to the warning, and that matter ended in tragedy. I think most recently that was in relation to one lady who was killed in Kokri a couple months ago. So that's just one example. But I don't necessarily think it was fair to say that society is violent in nature. Now, the Prime Minister, I don't know if he's now realizing that the country in which he governs has been plagued by crime and criminal activity for quite some time. And we also have to bear in mind, I'm not just speaking about gun violence, I'm not just speaking about domestic violence, I'm speaking about white-collar crime as well, because that too plays a significant role and a significant impact within society and can have a trickle-down effect. But what is interesting to me is that overall, it comes across to me that by saying that society is violent in nature, that murders and violent crimes will be the norm. That is what it comes across as. And I think in a way, though we cannot try to honestly overanalyze the Prime Minister's statements, you have to bear in mind as well, and I think in just thinking plainly as to what he said, it's just more smoke, and it's just more of a smoke screen, because for me, I've heard the Minister of National Security speak, and it's rather insignificant, so I wouldn't comment too much on that. But then you talk about certain things such as, CCTV cameras, ankle bracelets, even the tints on vehicles, but a basic things such as street lighting in Trinidad and Tobago helps with criminal activity, helps with crime. And to top it all off, you have to bear in mind, and I think we should be fair in this, there's also a bit of a social contract involved and a social responsibility involved. I think in Trinidad and Tobago, we've become so fearful for our lives that if we see something wrong taking place, we refuse to intervene, or we intervene for all the wrong reasons. Because many a times, if police are conducting their duties you see the intervention from those within society, and you often hear the term the police are wicked and whatnot, and he never did anything. But all that as well, and when you add all that, when you take all those different aspects of the formula and add it together, it's not violent, but there is instability, great instability. And I really don't think that those within authority, and I'm speaking from both sides now, I don't think those in authority really help the situation anyway. When we see the level of, if you would like to put it as verbal violence taking place within the walls of Parliament.
Well, not just that though. One of the things that Karen pointed out last week with regards to our corruption index, or one of them, I can't remember specifically which one. This is not the corruption perception index that looks at bureaucracy of government, but this is literally with regards to, well, they were looking at aspects of our police service, particularly with the 2 suspects who died in police custody. And now just over the weekend, there was an incident where a police officer died, shot on Friday, I believe, and the police was searching for the suspect. Allegedly, they illegally searched a private mosque and damaged or destroyed private property, as well as the fact that one of the suspects in the shooting of the policeman is reported to be willing to turn himself in if certain assurances for his safety are given. Now, given the way how the police seem to have a no-holds-barred attitude at pursuing the matter, which is interesting, you know, it's like, well, all of a sudden we have stops that we could still pull out when it truly matters to us. But more importantly, if they're willing to circumvent the rules in such a manner, and we already have a very, very stark example of what that could look like at the highest level, taken to the worst possible degree, I do have to wonder now, not only does it cause the TTPS to lose respect and some amount of credibility, whether rightfully or wrongfully, perception could be a matter of opinion, but it's still truthful in the eyes of the public if it is widespread enough. But also the fact that now you have a suspect that might otherwise have turned themselves in, maybe given evidence, you know, so the case could be wrapped up sooner. And similar to Paria, look how long this is taking. They now start. The family now, they have this void. They probably don't want to have to suffer through a long process as all of these situations have gone through, as Sean Luke's mother has gone through. But this suspect probably doesn't want to turn himself in, because what is really and truly, realistically, his considerations for not being harmed in custody as a form of reprisal? Well, if you have, go ahead.
No, that's not unnecessarily unfair to think of. I always get very upset when criminals commit their criminal act, and then want certain assurances of their safety and security. And I suppose under the law and under the Constitution, you are guaranteed that until you're proven guilty. However, it still gets to me, and it gets me rather upset. But you're right in pointing out that the police have lost a great amount of credibility and respect. That being said, I don't want to just fold up this particular body of national security and say, let's establish a new one. We need to somehow fix the problem, which in a way has become institutionalized. And also, Sean, it goes back to other aspects as well within our criminal justice system, such as those within remand. And I think that is what criminals, I hope that's what he meant. I want my these assurances, because you don't want to spend so many years on remand and then at the end of the day your case be thrown out, and that too adds to our current situation. Well, so as I said, all around if you analyze and look at everything, there is great instability, but to label society as violent on a whole may not be a fair statement to make.
So we have to take a break, but here's an interesting stat, and I said this last week. We are the 31st 35th most incarcerated relative to our population country in the planet. That's in the upper sixth. And over half of that is pre-trial incarceration. Over half of that is remand. So let's take a break. When we come back, we will have with us the alderman from Sangre Grande herself, Alderman Danielle Piper, and we will speak generally with regards to her observations to these trying times in TNT. Stay tuned. Sean Michael Small, Keaton Shaw, the alderman coming up next. We'll be right back.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Gift giving during a lockdown can still be hassle-free with a gift from FanZone with delivery options available nationwide. Visit and browse our Facebook and Instagram pages for all your official licensed merchandise and apparel and have it delivered to your door. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. FanZone, we've got you covered.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out, not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and we are joined with the alderman from Sangre Grande, our usual Monday contributor. Unfortunately, we did not have a Monday show last week, but she's here with us this week, and there are a lot of things that we like to just hear what she's been getting from the ground, from the people who, of course, have to deal with the day-to-day issues that we kind of talk about in isolation sometimes here on Talking Point, but she is someone on the ground. This is Alderman Danielle Piper. Good morning, Alderman.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Kitan. Good morning to our viewers and listeners on the television and on the social media.
So, Alderman, I think right now, as much as it is not as bad as the pandemic, right? It's not quite like that. But these periods have their own set of challenges. And I guess, unfortunately, we were all looking forward to normalcy, but normalcy seems to be a little bit elusive. We have a situation now with rising price of fuel. We have a situation now with crime and even school violence, some of which could be attributed to, well, having to readjust to life outside of the lockdown. Now, with regards to the rising price of fuel, I'd just like to know, what have you necessarily heard from the people in your area? How are they taking it? We know there are a lot of rural communities, and it's some tradesmen, farmers, fishermen, etc., who have been some of the hardest hit and who have been making the most noise. What have you been hearing?
Well, good morning again, and well, we have been hearing the same. We have been hearing the same noise basically, and it is understandable.
Well,
I just stopped hearing you for a bit, but I think it was a delayed something.
Okay. Well, so
yes,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, well, so with the raise in the price of fuel, I think a lot of people, well, there's a lot of pushback publicly. We don't necessarily hear anybody want to support the situation. Now, I challenged the country, I think it was on Friday, that listen, you know, the Prime Minister did say that it's not that there was an increase and we're all paying for the increase. The government is still paying not just the existing subsidy, but part of the increase as well. Has there been any talk that you have heard with regards to people being a bit more patient and tolerant with regard to the increase, or is the situation just so unbearable that people don't really have a choice in the matter and they can't agree with it?
Well, what I can say is that the Prime Minister's explanation, it is an explanation that persons, you know, in theory, they would understand, but, you know, practically, when you have to face it at the pumps, you know, there would be that certain sense of, oh gosh, this is frustrating. So I think it's a bit of both with respect to how persons are taking it. I believe for the most part, persons understand what is happening worldwide, and they know that for the longest while we have been enjoying fuel subsidies, and we were warned that, you know, fuel subsidies would be reduced ever so often. And as we had discussed at the last time we were there, there's always never a good time for persons to, you know, pay more or pay more tax or pay more for anything. So it is difficult. I mean, I live in Trinidad and Tobago. I drive, so, you know, I would experience it as well. You know, my husband, he has a turbo engine in his vehicle, and I'm like, I think you need to start to go with your partner to work as well. You know, so it is a difficult situation, and, you know, it would be remiss of me to just ignore persons' situation. However, at the same time, we do know it is something that was bound to happen. And given, you know, the situation worldwide, you know, we are in a bind. Between a rock and a hard place, basically.
Is that something you find yourself having to maybe speak to people about regularly, people who might not know about
definitely.
International pressure? This is not just something that Trinidad is doing arbitrarily.
Yes, definitely. Because, you know, we have union leaders out there and we have an opposition out there who would make it believe as though, you know, the government just wicked and just stressing out the citizenry. As if any government would want to intentionally harm or distress their citizens. So, you know, because of, you know, those voices out there in the wilderness, you know, we always have to try to bring it back and explain and commiserate and for persons to understand what is really taking place.
Well, Alderman, it seems as though the opposition is doing quite a good job if we keep going back to them and trying to defend the actions of the government. But in relation to that, I think we do understand the situation globally, although it's difficult to explain to the ordinary citizen and the common man on the street. It's not something that's very easy for us to explain, and it may not be easy for them to understand. But in trying to balance the situation down here, apart from the partial adjustment to fuel prices, do you think that overall in terms of trying to balance our budgets or to even make it easier on the citizen who may be struggling right now, and they are struggling, do you think that the government has done enough in terms of economic incentives and initiatives in order to ensure that there is a blanket, I guess, for the common man?
Well, yes, definitely. We have this new ministry, the Ministry of Youth Development and National Services, which has, every week you are hearing a number of courses or a number of opportunities out there for persons to try and join in, for persons to join the labor market, even if it is they may not get a job in particular, they may be unemployed, there are reasons or there are other avenues in which it is, you could try to, join in, as I said, the labor market. We have our social development network that hasn't stopped. We have that running still. That costs us billions and billions of dollars per year. We have pension grant. We have, there are things that we may not be happy with, but, sometimes, we always tend to look at, what we not getting, and we don't look at what we have. We are in a country where we enjoy so many things that we always think that it's a right when it's actually a privilege, So it is really up to us in the government to really, reach out to the persons to explain them, what it is we would have previously enjoyed in the past for whatever reason, in order for the future to benefit from anything that we may have, we have to scale back a bit.
But you also just mentioned pensions and social spending, which, yes, you're right to point that out. I mean, we've had a serious situation in relation to our social spending here in Trinidad and Tobago. However, one can make the argument that existed before and that existed for quite some time. Maybe not to the extent that we're seeing now, considering the circumstances, but in your opinion, I'm very happy that you mentioned the future. Do you think that poor management of the past has taken us to the point that where we're at now, and that we have found the opportunity to blame the COVID-19 pandemic for our flaws in our management of the past?
Well, you may have a point in that. Sometimes a manager may make a decision, and at that time, that might be the right decision. And then when you look at the future, that decision now would have affected what it is we experience now, as we see. Look at the NIB situation, So, you would expect or you would think that certain things are going to happen. And that's just how life is. It's frivolity of life, and you would put things in place and you'll plan and it wouldn't work out. So therefore you have to scale back and you have to adjust. But I wouldn't say that is an intentional, intentional for persons to really just be mismanagement. Well, of course, I know where there was intentional mismanagement, but I wouldn't even go into that there with you all because we're really dealing with the issues here. But if it is you were previously earning a certain amount of money and you are not earning that amount of money, you must scale back. And if it is we are keeping our social sector alive, therefore money must be cut from other areas.
Well,
so it's a sacrifice that governments have to make.
Well, Alderman, I mean, therein lies, I think, one of the subjective questions. What do you believe? Do you believe that we could afford more and that the government just wicked? Or do you believe that times are tough? I mean, there were indications of that even before COVID, and that revenue is a problem. My only concern, to kind of split the difference, is that I think there are some projects I have issue with. I have mentioned them already before. I won't bother to go into them with you. But I do agree that revenue can and probably is an issue. So a lot of these social programs, some economists are saying, look, we do have to scale these things back. Some of these things were only there when we were, for all intents and purposes, rich. Now that we aren't as rich as we were, could we keep them? Now, with that said, we do have the other issue with regards to crime. And I think one of the catch-22s is that now in times of hardship, where things are not plentiful in the private sector and the public sector, the government does not have the capacity or is unwilling, depending on how you view it, to put money into the system, whether it is to have more jobs, whether it is to have more grants, what have you. People, there seems to be perhaps a growing amount of desperation in the criminal element. A growing amount of well, just more of the population that might be looking towards crime as a means to survive. And maybe now our criminal motivation is beyond just wanting to live the fast, fancy life and looking towards maybe I just need to be able to eat and maybe even provide for my family, and this might be the only thing I have left. I don't know. I'm just putting forward a scenario. Crime seems to be a major deal. We've already had at least one murder suicide with regards to financial issues. Or rather, I could say a double suicide of two parents due to what appear to be financial issues. Who knows what other stresses the economic problems might cause with crime. With the rising crime levels, is there any concern with the people who you talk to in your community that, you know, a lot more people might be looking to do crime or even be more violent?
Well, in the Sandy Grande area in particular, we have one of the highest rates of multidimensional poverty indices in the country. So we would have already experienced that sense of, you know, high unemployment and whatnot. But as I'm saying, you know, it is up to the government now to create opportunities, which I believe that the government is really doing at this point in time for persons to, you know, try to not lead down that path. But there are so many different social factors that cause persons to join or to be a part of a life of crime. But as I'm saying, in the Sandy Grande area, you know, we would have had, I know that the commissioner would have visited us some time ago, and, you know, his concern was with respect to land grabbing issues. And he was saying a lot of the crime in our particular area was as a cause of that land grabbing situation there. So that is something that, you know, all of us were trying to partner to see what it is we can do to help the crime. Pretty larceny, of course, is on the rise. You know, persons going on farmers' plots and they're stealing their produce. They're stealing their cattle. And so, you know, persons, as you're saying, there is a sense of desperation. It is something that was expected, you know, post-COVID, because we know a number of persons would have lost their jobs. And even if it is you got back your job, you know, you would have used a lot of money in terms of your savings, you know, you're probably ill. Because when you have COVID, you know, my husband had COVID, and it's a very expensive time in terms of buying all the stuff that you need to get, and, you know. So we are going through a rough time as a country. I firmly believe that we are going to get through this. And, you know, crime is always a concern. It's a concern to all of us who live here. And, you know, we just hope and pray that persons, you know, choose the right path and do what it is they need to do. Because we all have to live here, and we all have to be comfortable where we live as far as possible.
Alderman, you know, I always appreciate you coming on the program, because you tend to really speak to the common folk as well, and to the man on the street, which is something that I don't often really see within many politicians or within our leaders, if I'm being honest with you. But you did mention, and you were very right in stating, that COVID-19 is an expensive time. I am experiencing that right now. But one of the comments you made really intrigued me, and that was it's something that we would have expected post-lockdown, post-COVID-19. Yeah. Do you think, in your opinion, that if that were the case, in terms of the national security elements, that proactive security measures or enough proactive security measures were implemented in time, rather than, okay, we're expecting this, we'll deal with it when it comes. No, we're expecting this, let's put things in place now in the event that it does happen.
But Keith, and I would hope that. I would hope so. I would really hope so. I'm looking on as well. As I say, even though, yes, I'm a politician, I'm a citizen of this country. And, you know, I'm looking on, I'm seeing Commissioner Jacob. You know, he is out there, he is working, he is trying to implement things, you know. So I believe and I hope, because, you know, everybody's supposed to know that this is supposed to be an issue post-COVID. So let's hope, let's see. Let's give them a chance to see if we'll see some turnaround.
There's an additional opinion I want to ask you after, but before I do, with regards to COVID, just how has it been like in Sangre Grande? Have the numbers risen over there, or have you all relatively been able to move on and from COVID and have a relatively normal life now with the reopening?
Well, what I can say, you know, during the height of COVID, Sangre Grande in particular, you know, we were hard hit. And, you know, so we have a number of our burgesses, you know, who would have lost their family members. So I don't think we will ever be fully the same, because, you know, we are dealing with that, because we have persons as well, you know, prominent persons in the, you know, Sangre Grande community who would have also passed. And, you know, we miss them, you know. For instance, putting a little plug here one time, on Friday, this month is Autism Awareness Month, and I am an advocate. And on Friday, I'll be having an event at the Duranta Community Center. Day of Fun for Children with Special Needs. But yes, we are treating the children, but also we will have Ministry of Social Development there, Autistic Society there, you know. And normally, Daryl's Famous Foods, he would contribute to my event yearly. So this year is like, well, we have no more Daryl, because he is one of the prominent persons I spoke about that died of COVID. And, you know, well, his son reached out to me and he was like, you know, this is something that Daddy always, you know, he always liked this event, Miss Piper, and of course we are going to contribute to the event. So, you know, it's kind of bittersweet, because, you know, so that's the situation that we have in Sangre Grande. We are trying to move on, because life moves on, you know, but it is difficult because of the lives that were lost. So COVID has
currently though,
Currently
though, infection numbers, are they relatively low, or are there any new waves of COVID?
Well, not in Sangre Grande in particular, but I'm seeing countrywide, there has been a little uptick with respect to the cases. So, you know, persons are looking on that. I see my colleagues down in Point Fortin, unfortunately, they had to scale way back on their plans for the Point Fortin Borough celebrations due to the uptick. You know, citizens are not happy because, you know, they were excited to go out and take part. But, you know, as a responsible government or responsible council, you know, we must do what it is we have to do, because increase in cases, increase in infections, most likely leads to increase in hospital stays. And we know what happens in terms of the increase in hospital stays. We know exactly the cost of COVID. So we are looking on to see what is happening.
Well, we only have a few minutes left before before our news break. I just have to ask, it came up over, well, I noticed this late last night, so forgive me if I'm a bit ambushing you, but the Minister of Local Government, he made an announcement, I believe, with regards to the reform. It seems as though he is he's moving full steam ahead, and he made a comment where he said he wants to look at the THA as the model with which to perhaps transition local government bodies to operate more like. He's looking at that, and perhaps maybe their independence and their more encompassing capabilities and roles. What is your initial reaction to that idea? Because it seems as though there's a lot of promises with regards to how much change is on the table.
Well, that's what is here about the THA. That has always been at the forefront in terms of the local government reform. You're always told that it would be more along the lines of the THA. So that's not something new that the minister is saying. And with respect to THA, you forget they receive a certain percentage of money from the budget per year, per annum. So maybe that is what the minister is referring to, because, you know, we would apply for funding, and, you know, we would get, you know, sometimes you apply for the stars and you end up just on top of the trees. So maybe, we will get enough funding in order for us to do it as we have to do at the council. And also, I know with respect to there's an executive council at the THA.
Yes.
So we want to do that same model in terms of an executive council at the regional corporations. So there will be some aspects from the THA that if you read the local government reform document, it isn't there. It is inside of the document.
Well, I stand corrected. Although to me it seems like quite a bit of, how shall I put it? It seems to be quite a tall order to head towards that direction and to have so many small executives. Keaton.
Alderman, I just wanted to know, just before we go, in relation to the local government, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that funding would have been a bit difficult in terms of having to reprioritize expenditure. But as you mentioned, that the THA gets a piece of the pie, the budget pie, every year. In terms of local government funding within recent times, how accessible has it been, or the ease of access to funding in terms of applying for funds and the release of those funds? So has there been difficulty currently with funding in terms of local government and the plans for local government?
Yes, definitely. Initially you were told to scale back to 7% of the annual budget. And, we were told certain things along the way. The situation that we are encountering, I know my colleagues in Princestown and whatnot, I'll be quarreling, and they try to say that, it's geographical discrimination. But we have in Port of Spain and in Point Fortin and in Diego Martin, every single corporation, every single one, when you talk to them, when you talk to the CEOs who are the accounting officers at the corporation, they have to really do a lot of accounting magic. Funding is low. And not just in the local government aspect, I think in all the government ministries, you would hear they speak about that. There has been a lack of funding with respect to doing what it is they need to do. So it has been difficult. It has been difficult. But we are doing the best with what it is we have. We are trying to do the best with what it is we do have.
Well, that is more or less all the time we have for this segment. Alderman, I'd like to thank you for coming on once again. And that's an interesting message to leave off there. It's happening everywhere. So maybe our previous discussion with regards to what the government can or cannot afford, therein lies some proof to that side of the argument. But we leave it up to the viewer to decide ultimately what it is they want to believe on this. So stay tuned. News on the hour next. Alderman Piper, thank you. Keaton and I will be back to hear from you, the viewer, when we return. This is Talking Point on WESN.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard. and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Psyched. Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
Welcome back to Talking Point. So now is the time when we want to hear from you, the viewer. Tell us what you have to say. Do you agree or disagree with anything we've said? Maybe something the Alderman said, maybe something Keaton said, maybe something I said. Or do you have perhaps maybe some other topic that you would like to discuss right now? So call in 623-9376, 622-9338. We do have a caller from Tobago. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm okay.
Very good. First, to Keaton, I want to say that my will for you is that you recover in health and get back to your normal, sprightly self that we normally see on the TV. So I really hope that you recover well. I want to be brief this morning with my comment, very, very brief, because my passion is very, 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 very high at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I find the Prime Minister's comments about TNT being a violent society is being very irresponsible. It says to me that our governance structure is deteriorating rapidly, that, they're behaving like, school children fighting over marbles or something like that, and they're not paying attention to the ring that they are erasing. They're affecting society. Society is made up of people. And by saying that your society is violent, you're saying to the people of TNT that they are more criminal-minded people. There are more criminals in our society than there are good people. People who are going about their daily lives, living, trying to make a living for themselves and their families, contributing to the economy, and hoping that their country improves. You're saying that there are more people that are against that are just out for themselves and just looking to take from other people than there are good people. You've really done a disservice, as far as I'm concerned, to the society by making such an irresponsible statement. And it tells me that our governance structure is in bad need of being reset. We're following the wrong course of action in the way we are governing ourselves. Our parties act like enemies and not like opposition of checks and balances. And this is harming our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. I mean, it's an interesting point you made. I think Keaton also was making the same point earlier. But the second bit there that you added on, where, you know, our politicians are not acting the way they are supposed to, I think it goes back to what I said on Friday. It's not their opposition leader and our prime minister, or our opposition leader and their prime minister. It is our opposition leader and our prime minister, because they have those roles as part of our national government. Keaton, I know you might want to give a comment, but we do have another caller from Clarkson Bay. Good morning, caller. Morning, Mr. Fisherman.
Yeah, morning.
Good morning, Mr. Fisherman.
Morning.
Morning, Sean. Morning, Keaton. Very good morning to Keaton. And I hope you feel much more better.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the old man has to defend the party, you know, is my take. Because when you check the cost of living, and with the rise of gas, look at the, for instance, we have byproduct from gas, from oil. Not so far when you get the oil, you have byproducts like, for instance, the fiber of liquid and so forth, all this kind of thing. If you know the price from within less than a year that fiber gas liquid go up to, a gallon was $1.25. Now we're paying almost $2.67, most around here. And then when you add that down, you adding up this gas and it is stung a little bit. But when you add it up per day, then you have to put expenditure when you have to send out your boat.
Yeah.
Expenditure with things, all these kind of things. How much is the consumer going to pay for fish? Tell me. A little hole. Sometimes you just barely make ends meet.
Yeah.
Barely.
Well, Mr. Fisherman, though, the cost of food is going up across the board, so I hate to say this. I hate to say this, but the cost of fish probably will have to go up too.
Yeah, but Sean, it's perishable goods, you know, perishable goods.
Well, yeah.
You understand me?
Yeah.
Can't keep it that long. But my take on the crime, look, we had a commissioner of police hunting the criminals. Now we have the criminals hunting the law enforcers. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People really going on in this country with a small, nice little country as ours. Give somebody a chance to. Okay, listen off it.
Thanks, Mr. Fisherman.
First of all, I'd like to thank the caller from Tobago very much for his well wishes. I hope to be back in studio very soon, bright and bubbly and spicy. And I must also agree with you that there is a serious issue with governance. And I think we failed I think government has failed to recognize poor governance, put it that way. But I guess we've grown so accustomed to it. And just to add to Mr. Fisherman, you're absolutely right. How much more is the country going to pay for a natural resource that we ourselves harness down here?
So we have another caller from Diego Martin. Oh, wait, sorry, the first caller from Diego Martin. Excuse me. Good morning, caller.
Well, I will accept your apologizing, Diego Martin, and welcome back, Mr. Shah. I hope you speedy recovery so you could be in the studio with Mr. Paul. All right.
Thank you, sir.
I want to scrutinize the judicial and legal system. All right? I was reading on the newspaper where a client out of the UK was criticizing an attorney for not vetting a transaction he's supposed to have done. And why have we arrived at this situation? And it comes back to me that judicial and legal system is not managing the people responsible for basically running the organization. Both sets, the judiciary and the judicial and legal service and the law, bar and law association. Let me reflect on a number of issues that this impact significantly. And we have to remember the Sacharma issue. There were judicial officers in that, very high legal officer. The person who collapsed in the bus came back, that is McMichael's, to practice in private practice. Recently, we had a senior counsel in the ANV issue saying, please, Olia, continue with this. Don't go to abrogation. And we had right hand and left hand saying, we go settle. That tells me something is wrong. And more importantly, we had a court case right now where two senior former legal people are before the courts because a senior counsel gave evidence that a case, together with another senior, that a case could continue. He collected money for that brief, and then when government changed, he collected briefs to say indication will fail if it continues. Is that person, I think you all understand where I'm coming, I'm not going to call names, can that person continue to practice in Trinidad, or has he been debarred? Because, you know, when you come into this country, you have to do a swearing and things to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying, when legal minds and attorneys of those caliber has questions to answer, what are we doing to filter them out and throw them out of the thing? If we don't sanitize our judicial and legal system, we will fail. For example, the Chief Justice hasn't come back to tell us if the Vera issue has been resolved. If you have high judicial officers, appeal court judges, getting into the political guile, that tells you, I have seen two organizations has continued to fail this country and facilitate wrongdoing. That is the police service and the judiciary service. Go on, have a nice day.
All right, caller. Thank you for that. I mean, I'll just add my own 2 cents there. How many different constitutional crises we are sweeping under the rug with regards to the Police Service Commission? Or how about the fact that our current Attorney General is acting because he's actually former Attorney General who we all believe was demoted from the post, you know, not but a couple months later, lest he is back to acting, and not acting for a day or two, acting for a considerable amount of time, bringing up bills and presenting them in Parliament. Keaton.
I agree with what you're saying. I found it amusing that the former Attorney General is now acting as Attorney General, which is possibly a good sign for the former Attorney General, if you want to put it, with all the rumors that have been circulating. But overall, this is nothing new. This is absolutely nothing new. And yet we act as though we're surprised. We're constantly surprised. Unfortunately, I think what we have to bear in mind as well is that beyond just the TTPS and the police service, which in my opinion has, I'm not entirely sure what's the purpose they serve, but knowing what police stand for, I will always respect that and will always, push for us to respect that. In the instance of the judiciary, I was reading that the former Attorney General was making the argument that since they've legalized marijuana, it's actually cleared up a lot of court cases. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, hold up. Shouldn't that also lead to other cases being heard more? Should it also allow for, if there's an ease up in the system for one area in which flooded the courts before in terms of offenses, shouldn't that allow for the court to now utilize those resources elsewhere? But have we seen that at all? No, we have not. So my position is, I'm not entirely sure who to look at. Should I look at the Office of the Attorney General, which the Ministry of Justice now falls under? or should I look at the Chief Justice and the judiciary? Because I'm not entirely sure anymore who should take responsibility for this, simply because it's a back and forth. It's a back and forth now.
Let me cut to the chase there and give you the answer. All of the above. We have 2 calls on the line. I think the first one is from Diego Martin. Good day.
Yeah, I agree with all of the above. Hi, guys. Good morning. Thank you. Firstly, lovely to see that ray of sunshine. Keaton, good to see you back.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing your experience. And again, we're seeing you're a perfect example of a healthy 30-year-old man experiencing, I'm assuming, BA2. And I haven't spoken too much about COVID for a while because people seem to behave as though it's all over, as you mentioned, Sean. So as people are moving on because they think it's time, so is Omicron because that's its job, to continue moving on and infecting, as we're seeing in China. Beijing is still open, but having mass testing now, hoping not to imprison as Shanghai did. Delhi is having a 4th wave. In Australia, they just opened for shipping and cruising and all of that. So they've got more cases on a vessel. It's rising in states in the U.S., but their overall vaccination rate is about 66%. The over 65 population is pretty good at 90%. Their kids 5 and up are 70, but hello, we here are still at 50.8%. And that we're just stuck at that. We're not going further. School opened on Tuesday, and by Thursday, 2 infants and 5 other kids in primary school were infected in Penal and at Astra. Keaton, as you spoke about the home kits, of course it's underreported. Nobody's going to bother with that. I spoke to my cousin yesterday. She's one of the chief consultants at the Couva ICU. She's been there since day 1 in 2020, so she's seen it all. She agrees that long COVID will overwhelm our system, and she's very worried about the new strains, and she says that people should continue to still be masked and, of course, vaccinated. Yeah, and one last thing on violence.
Quick.
I think we've never addressed this since the 1990s, and they're now coming to talk about that as if they didn't know. Parents again have abdicated responsibility, no ethics, morals, values, because this is a lawless country reeking with violence. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, caller. Oh boy. There we go.
Excellent point, though, on abdicating responsibility. Excellent point. We don't like to face it, but it's true.
One quick tidbit. Barbados extended their state of emergency. Despite lifting or lightening restrictions, they extended it. Make that, viewers, of what you will. We have another caller from Diego Martin. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Well, I'm glad to see Mr. Shah is out. At least you can see him on television, and he looks very well. I must say that he seems to be on the road to recovery.
Thank you.
I can advise you. I know myself. I believe I had COVID as well. I had all the symptoms, but I normally treat myself. But my 2 grandchildren also had it, and I treated them as well. What is good about this is that the paracetamol is very good. You just take two every day until it eases up, and you make sure you have your appetite. Good soup, beef soup or chicken soup, coconut water, and you're good to go, my friend. No big set of heartache, yes, and rest.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cole. I appreciate the advice, and I'd like to let you know that I've already started following it. I've drunk so much coconut water, and I've taken paracetamol every 4 hours as directed by the doctor, and you're absolutely right. It's amazing how powerful paracetamol is.
And do not underestimate chicken soup. I don't know exactly what it is, but it is something about chicken soup. Or maybe soup, but chicken soup seems to be the thing. We have a caller from Chagonas. Good morning.
Thank you, caller from Diego Martin.
Morning, Chagonas.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Professor, good morning.
Hey.
You mentioned some doubt as to who is responsible with the Chief Justice. It's simple. The Chief Justice have judicial independence. He have to see that you have proper decisions made and consistency in decision. The administration is the province of the permanent secretary. That is why when the Chief Justice tried to get security for them, he was wrong. That was for the permanent secretary to handle. I guess the rest of the thing I have to say today is spitting in the wind, because I've said them before. Because you keep talking about a shortage of revenue, and I keep telling you it is a failure of government to collect their revenue and deliberately destroy their revenue sources, especially in property tax, which up to now we cannot find out why it is that the recommendation that was made to government to pass property tax to the regional authorities, whereas those authorities had a higher compliance rate than the central government, the opposite was done. And we talk about local government before, with the final report they have bandied about it, never came up in the consultation. I attended about 6 of those consultations, and what they talk about was getting the revenue to carry out their activities. Anyway, gentlemen, I will leave some time for another caller, unless you have a question.
I actually have...
Professor, sure, go ahead, Sean, go ahead.
No, I, as always, I have a point that agrees with the professor, so it's not a question, but Keaton, I
actually have a point that agrees with the professor as well, because if you summarize everything that he just said, it points to what I said earlier: governance and management.
Well,
simple.
I have a stark example to give, and that's Sri Lanka. From what I understand, a lack of proper tax revenue collection is one of the main culprits that led to Sri Lanka's economy and the situation that they find themselves in right now, with so much debt that they basically cannot pay off. More or less, that's one of the major causes, because they can't just reinvent and re-implement proper collection now when they allowed it to wallow in such a state of disrepair. And they had a very large modern port built off of loans from the Belt and Road Initiative, I could only assume. Long and short is, because they defaulted on those loans, that port is now technically leased out to the Chinese government or Chinese private interests. I'm not sure which one exactly, but it is owned by someone from China for 99 years. It's leased out. So I don't know if we have any projects.
It's lease, 99-year lease is ownership.
Right. You know? Thank you, Professor, for that point. That's a very important point, because I do believe Sri Lanka is another example that we should look at carefully, because they use loan financing to promote growth. And I think, Keaton, that's what you were worried about with all of these loans.
Well, apart from Chinese financing, which has really crippled Sri Lanka, and I use the term cripple because Sri Lanka is not collapsing. Sri Lanka has collapsed. And I don't mean that in an offensive way, but I mean that purely from an analysis. And Sri Lanka is struggling not only to supply its local diesel market, which has now affected the fuel markets on a whole. They're also now struggling for basic supplies, such as medicine. And yes, that is basic supplies. In the modern world that we live in, clean, drinkable, running water, as well as food, medical supplies, those are basic supplies. And they are now struggling for that. And that alone shows you, not only was it the internal management and the microeconomics of Sri Lanka, but also I think we have to bear in mind as well Chinese financing. I can't stress that enough. I've said that before in the program, and one of the examples that you can look at is with the Port of Spain General Central Block. I know that there's litigation taking place there, I hope we find out more. The entire thing about it is we don't know what the clauses in those contracts are. We will never know what the clauses in the contracts are, because there is a clause that states that these clauses cannot be made public. And therefore, at the end of the day, who's losing out? You and I, as well as the callers.
Yes. And I think, once again, it seems as though politicians don't understand how useful transparency can be to them if they just figure out how to utilize it properly. Because when they are transparent, we have less questions, we have less speculation, and therefore we have less accusation. But I have another thing.
Sure, if they were transparent, we might not have a show.
Well, true. Maybe it will be all good news. It will be all good news. But I have another thing to consider. And the fact that, I'm going to say it again, these are hard times around the world. It's not as though there's some untouched corner that's going to rescue everybody else. We all have to figure it out together or on our own, whichever way works for us. But a lot of the strife around the world, crime, war, military coups, I think it's because of the economic uncertainty and turmoil, and we have to be prepared for more to happen. It's just common sense, both our crime situation as well as internationally with the unrest. But just consider this for a second. We are accustomed to a lot of times of good fortune for about the last 20 to 40 years. And there's a saying that's going around now, good times, times of plenty, breed weak men. Times of struggle breed strong men. And maybe this is just a cyclical thing where now we need people to rise to the occasion. We complain about the politicians all the time, but perhaps we need somebody new that's more capable now. Or at the very least, maybe not to replace, but to augment, to show the way. Maybe some of the people we have now might step up further, we don't know. But I don't think we could do business as usual to get out of this.
Sure, I'd just like to quickly add to that. I don't think it's even a matter now about we need somebody to step up to the plate and show us the way. I think all of us have a personal responsibility to play in this entire thing, and it's a social duty, not only to each other, but to ourselves. I'm rather tired and frustrated of party politics always blinding the mindset of individuals. I'm always tired of the rising sun or the red and ready flag being the only thing and the only way we see out of it. If we were to open up our minds and be a little more intellectual, Sean, trust me, we can do great things. But we are a people that are lazy, and we are a people that do not think for ourselves. We are followers, and unfortunately, in a way, that has also led us to the situation that we are in.
Well, we have to go, but again, I agree with that 100%. It's not them and us, it is ours. All of the government, both parties are ours. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Talking Point for this Monday. We will be back tomorrow. Keaton and myself will be back, as well as our usual Tuesday contributor. We will discuss all the important topics, but until then, we'll see you next time.